Welcome to the Alen Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is Joe Little. Joe is a leadership coach, corporate trainer, and facilitator. He trains professionals on leadership and communication skills, and he has a dual mandate to help corporations achieve their goals while simultaneously promoting employees' careers. He's a personal friend of mine, and today he's gonna share with us his secrets on how we can become better communicators and better leaders. Joe, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Good to have you, my friend.
So, Joe, I know you for many years now. I wonder if you could tell me the background story of how is it that you became a corporate trainer, communicator, coach, etc.
Yes. Well, there were two major catalysts, I think, in my life and in my trajectory that got me to where I am today. One of them is actually, Alain, where we met, which was Toastmasters. It's a worldwide organization that serves people who are trying to improve their public speaking. It's in more than 100 countries. And what I noticed was the higher up I went in that, more and more people in the highest rungs of Toastmasters International use their speaking in some capacity in their work. So some of them are platform speakers that you might see at big motivational events. And there was another stream of speakers that were in the space of training and professional corporate facilitating. And ultimately, I drifted towards that side of it. And I had some good early influences that still act as mentors to me today that moved me in that direction. And the other catalyst was simply having had a business background. I started working at 14. I had a business at 17. And in my formative years, during and after university, I touched different facets of an organization. I was in sales, I was in marketing, I did branch and sector level management, operations. So it was through that I was able to actually be inside a company, but also I always liked the side of speaking and teaching and facilitating.
So I hear those terms coaching, facilitating, training, but to be honest, I don't really know what that means. I always act like I understand what they're saying, but I don't. So can you enlighten me? And I'm sure one or two of my listeners are curious as well.
Of course. And being honest, I think even some of the professionals, colleagues of mine who use those labels, even we're not really sure what they mean. But let me try and clarify them best for your audience. So starting with a coach. So a coach's job is to help the coachee or the client get to where they want to go. So for example, in my line of work, I'll see people who are struggling with a particular situation involving a group that they lead. So maybe there's waning motivation or they're struggling to overcome some kind of a barrier, and that's impacting performance. So a coach's job is to fully immerse themselves into the situation and the struggle that the client is experiencing. That is my only focus. So for 50 minutes, I'm only focusing on you. Now, the other labels that you mentioned earlier, which was trainer and facilitator, those ones, they overlap a little bit. So for example, a trainer, if I go into a company and I train on public speaking, or I train on oral communication for rising managers, that's all about skill acquisition. So the understanding is that the people who are in the room receiving that training want to acquire this skill, and then they have the means and the motivation to go and practice it. Facilitation overlaps a little bit in the sense that there's still a transfer of knowledge, but a facilitator doesn't necessarily need to be an expert in the subject matter. The main job of a facilitation is to come in and, like the title says, facilitate dialogue, get people talking. And the major aim of a facilitation might be to make a team bond better, or it might be to overcome certain barriers or rifts that are existing within a team inside a company. And I've been part of all three of these. Facilitations can certainly be very nice in terms of how they can make a team coalesce and work better together. So that would be a nice overview of the three labels.
So looking over your website, I see the array of clients in diverse industries. I wonder if you could tell us who are your clients, and do you coach just top level or middle level or everyone in a corporation? Who is asking the most for your services?
Right. Well, that's a long answer that I'll try to keep short. The overwhelming majority of the people that I work with are having their, let's call it development. So that could include coaching, facilitation, training. The overwhelming majority of my clients are having their development sponsored and funded by their employers. So the companies are coming and they're saying, we'd like to put this wave of people through trainings, or we'd like to sponsor some coaching for them, or we'd like you to come into this group and facilitate. So that I distinguish from individuals. So individuals coming to me on their own accord. There are some, but there are fewer of them. So definitely it's more on the corporation side of things. The other thing is an overwhelming majority of them are knowledge workers. So I see a lot of companies, for example, in the pharma science space. I see companies that are in banking or financial services. I'll also see some public sector work once in a while, some different agencies of provincial or state or even federal governments that we'll work with. And these are just the array of companies that I see, but perhaps most interestingly is who are the people that I work with directly. I've worked with data scientists, I've worked with clinical technicians, I've worked with sales teams, account managers, engineers, doctors, academics, scientists, you name it. And again, a lot of the times these are knowledge workers. So, for example, we might not necessarily see a lot of self-employed plumbers, pipe fitters, tradespeople. Again, it's just who they tend to work for. They tend to be employed by larger companies, and that's who's able to fund the training. So I do work with a wide variety of professionals, and the focus, though, is narrowly on the communication and the leadership building.
I wonder if you could describe a little bit more in detail how does the coaching work? Let's say XYZ corporation hires you. Who do you coach in that, and what's the whole process?
Yeah, coaching specifically, just to answer your question more directly, coaching is done usually one-on-one. So in the case of corporate coaching, I may be working with a leader, a specific leader, who is having a challenge with their team. Or one thing that often gets uncovered in coaching is that we discover that particular leader wants to take their career in a different direction. Or they want to move laterally. They want to move up, right? And there we end up working with what is the person's individual goals and how can they get themselves there. And that's the fundamental of all coaching is where are you now, where do you want to get, and how do we get there? So it can be situations of leadership involving other people who they work with. And that kind of coaching usually is going to be proposed by the direct managers of the person. They'll call up and say, hey, I've got somebody and we have budget for coaching. We'd like to use your services. And that's pretty much it. They don't interfere more than that. They simply set the stage for the coaching to happen. And then the individual in question will work with me over a number of sessions. That's the crux of how coaching works.
In the field of facilitation, I assume that's a huge umbrella that covers different segments. First of all, I would like to know what is it that you specialize in and what kind of things you don't do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, facilitation, like I mentioned before, is really about getting dialogue and getting people to engage in whatever the topic is, but also engage their fellow learners and their colleagues. That's what it's all about. So I'll give you an example of something very recently. I was brought into a sales organization, and I was asked to help them at improving their communication with each other, and as well with leads that they have. And the goal was obvious. It was to help them work better together to close more business. So I came in to do that. The mandate is clear from the beginning. I talk to people that are bringing me in. I get to learn what are the needs and potentially barriers of the group that I'm working with. That's what I'm doing in my facilitations, just in a nutshell. And I never know what I'm going to get, and that's some of the fun of facilitating. I do facilitations of my own. Well, I'll find my own clients, but also I'll partner with other organizations that are being asked to bring in facilitators. So it's always a new experience to try and see what is this group like, what do they need, what do they want, and I adapt to what I have in front of me.
We live in Montreal. We are so fortunate to have this diversity of cultures. People from all over the world come here, and in Canada as well. This is a welcoming country, and I know that you speak several languages. First of all, what are those languages, and do you get to work a little bit in each one of those, or I guess the main thrust of your work is in English?
Yes, I like that question of languages for a number of reasons. But the short answer is I speak four languages. Being in Montreal, as you said, this is my native city. It's where I grew up. French is the language of business and life. But I'm the product of a Canadian father and a Mexican mother. So that explains the English and Spanish being spoken in the house. And in the last few years, my travels and just my inclination have helped me learn some Portuguese. It's not a working caliber yet, but it's getting there. And I do train, facilitate, and coach in 3 of the 4 languages that I speak.
Let's put that to the test. Est-ce que tu parles français, Joe?
Oui, bien sûr, je parle français.
And ¿cómo va tu español?
Mi español desde chiquito, excelente, como el tuyo.
Ok. Fala portugués?
Sí, yo falo portugués, un poquillo.
Okay, un poquillo. Okay, well, great. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more in detail what are soft skills. I hear that all over the news all the time. You have to develop your soft skills, but I don't know exactly what that is and how is it different from leadership, how is it different from, I don't know, so many of the things that we could learn to better interact in a corporation. But soft skills, I hear that everywhere, and I don't know what that is.
Yes, it's a fair question. There is confusion about what that is and what they entail. Soft skills are soft in comparison to hard skills. So think of a hard skill as something that you might have acquired in your formal training. So if you're an engineer, well, everything that you learned as part of that degree is a hard skill. If you do car mechanics, that's a hard skill. If you have medical studies, that's a hard skill. So anything that is tied to your diploma that you would have learned in formal education or training would be a hard skill. The soft skills, on the other hand, have to do with the invisible, the intangibles. So I'll give you some examples. For example, emotional intelligence, resilience. These are examples of soft skills that concern yourself, the person. So they exist in my own head, and it's how I manage and conduct myself in the world. And then there are things like collaboration, decision-making, what else? Public speaking, negotiations, influence, persuasion. All of these things they're soft skills again, but it's about me in relation to the outside world. It allows me to make relationships. It allows me to collaborate and lead people in the workplace and function in a social environment as a productive worker or contributor. So soft skills are different from hard skills in that sense. Now, you say you hear it on the news, and part of the reason is there is growing acceptance and need for soft skills in the workplace. And here's why. Because companies spend a lot of money and a lot of time recruiting the best technical experts they can find to suit their business. But a lot of the soft skills, and we'll get to this later perhaps, a lot of the soft skills are not taught in formal programs. Specifically the ones that I do and colleagues of mine do, like communication and leadership skills. That is just something you might learn along the way. But previously, it didn't get much respect in the corporate world. You didn't get to make any extra money just because you claimed to have a soft skill. But what companies are now realizing is that the bulk of the attrition, the turnover, the avoidable conflict that exists in teams and companies is not a problem of hard skills. It's a problem of soft skills, or the lack of them. So that's where the need has opened up, and where industries are moving to keep the talent that they have, but upskill them or cross-skill them so that they are more functional in their people leadership and their people management. And that, of course, begins with ourselves.
I also hear a lot of macro trends going on, especially since COVID and after COVID. I hear about the mass resignation. I also hear a term quite often lately, quiet quitting. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the macro trends going on in the working industry right now.
Sure. Well, one of those big trends, and this is the one I touched on in my earlier answer, has to do with a growing acceptance and need for soft skills in the workplace. And I see this everywhere in the world. I train global organizations. They have footprints and operations in dozens of countries. And even though the individual cultures are different, there is an acceptance for the need of soft skills. So that's a trend. It's not a new thing. It's been going on for, I'd say, a good 12, 15 years, perhaps longer. And it continues to open up new opportunities. Now, more recently, some of the other trends that you might be seeing out there, COVID, for example, as I'm sure you know, you've had guests in past episodes who have talked about the impact of COVID on work. And the ways in which that's changed is that we're leading virtually. You are working with people you never see. You get on meetings, they're maybe not there. Also, certain industries have been disproportionately affected in COVID, which means that workers are leaving certain industries in droves, and they're having to quickly get retrained or cross-trained to work in different industries. So there's a focus in the world of hiring and people development on transferable skills. So that if you work for a travel agency and then you want to go work for an advertising firm, just to make a radical shift, you've got to lean on your transferable skills. And a lot of times your soft skills are going to be those things. So in that sense, COVID, rapid changes in the economy, also the interests, the specific interests of people who work. For example, in my parents' or in my grandparents' day, there would have been an expectation that you work for one place forever. And that was a product of the economy and the upbringing of the time. But nowadays, especially in the youngest cohorts at work, there is a focus on personal development and growth. So if you run a team, you have a company, you're going to notice that your youngest workers, a lot of the time, they want to feel like they're growing and progressing and advancing. So that has led to companies realizing that, gee, if we want to retain and keep top talent working for us, we better provide them an offering of upskilling because they want to feel like they're progressing. If we don't give them that, we're going to lose this talent to competitors. So I mean, that we can go on all day with trends, but I think these are some of the more significant ones that we're seeing that are opening up the opportunity for new development and skills.
Okay, so you saw me on the importance of soft skills. Now, who should invest in this? Should I, as an individual, take money out of my pocket and hire a coach in order for me to progress faster or farther in the corporation? Or should the corporation take money from their bank account and invest in me, their employee? Who foots the bill?
Well, the very best investment that anybody can make is investing in themselves, investing in their own education. I've had mentors who've said that. I believe it's true. Now, as for who pays for it, well, I think that largely depends on where you work. Often I'll joke in my trainings that the best part of today's training is that someone else paid for it. So if somebody else is willing to invest in your training, either because you asked for it and they gave you a budget, or simply because as a condition of you working there, you're given a certain amount of money to procure your own training independently, use it. It's free money. Take it. Use it. I would also recommend to people that they procure these services in skills that they're going to use. So if you want to learn project management, but you don't work in it, and you may never work in it, maybe now's not the time to do it. So consider the timing of when you acquire these skills. Now, like I said, a minority of my clientele are going to be these individual contributors who will reach into their own pockets and spend. So if you feel inclined to do that, by all means, do it. But if you can get in somewhere that can help foot the bill, why not?
And okay, so I wonder if you could just give us some tips on how we can become better communicators. If I want to stand up in front of a group of people and sound coherent and capture the interest of those people who are there in front of me, what are some tricks that I could use?
Sure. Well, one of the most basic things that can help speakers or communicators everywhere is talk to people. It seems almost silly, so elementary. Talk to people. Now, consider this example. How many times have you been in a presentation, virtual or in person, where the person who's at the front of the room, who's leading, seems to just be speaking into the wind. They're reading off slides. They're rattling off facts and figures and dates and charts, but they're not making it stick. They don't look at anybody. They don't seem to aim their voice in any particular direction. Those are the kinds of things that we've been conditioned to listen to. And that's why there's so little engagement and so much distraction in most presentations, because we've just gotten used to bad speeches. So what are good speeches? You ask the question, what can people do to better engage? Well, look at people when you talk to them. Now, eye contact is culture specific, but in the Western business culture, eye contact is a sign of engagement. Look at the people when you talk to them. Move around. Move your voice. Really make people feel like the product or the service or the ideas that you're bringing that day are intended for them. Make them feel unique in that sense. And I think you're going to notice, without changing anything else, that little shift is going to make a big difference.
Joe, I think I need to improve my leadership skills and my communication skills. So I'm going to get in touch with you later on. But I wonder, members of my audience, how they can get in touch with you. What's the process if someone wants to work with you, either as an individual or as a corporation?
Yeah. Well, the very first step, if we were to keep this nice and short, would be find me either on LinkedIn, Joe Little, or you can find me on my website, joelittle.info. That's spelled exactly like my name is spelled. So first thing to do is get in touch with me, and then we'll figure out the next steps. Now, the distinction between are you an individual or are you a business, that's an important one. So if you're an individual, we're going to find out what exactly you'd like to get, and then we can discuss what are some options for getting it supported by the company you work for, by your employer. Now, if you're a business, I also want to hear about the group that you're intending to have trained or coached. What are their needs? And in the case of a business, it's going to be a different set of questions. But ultimately, I want to learn from you what's going on and how I can help you. So joelittle.info, or you can find me on LinkedIn. There's going to be a free call. So that first consultation is free. I get to know what I can do for you. And if I can do it, great. If I can't do it, I'll try and help you find somebody who can.
Joe, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure, Ale.